shows, and everyone else would take money, and we'd get sort of 10 cents or something. And our manager used to always say, eat oranges, just eat lots of oranges, you'll be fine.
Just to get this out of the way right at the very top, I will not be discussing the circumstances of Michael Hutchinson's death, and I will not be explaining my reasons for this decision. I'm here to talk about music. I don't know that I've given a whole lot of thought to INXS over the years. To me, they've always been just one of what seems like dozens of groups in the mid-'80s and early '90s that were all doing the same kind of a thing. Great-looking frontman, videos shot only using white backgrounds, partially cut off close-ups, second camera work that's handheld, low frame rate, grainy. In my head, they're kind of similar to bands like Fine Young Cannibals, Was Not Was, EMF, Pseudo Echo, UB40, and the like. Though of all the artists I associate with this particular style, I think it's probably fair to say that I'm most familiar with INXS. I know more of their songs anyway. But admittedly, that's still not very much. So it's time to get into the research. Here are the 5 things for INXS. At the heart of INXS, there are 3 brothers, Andrew, John, and Tim Ferriss. Andrew was high school friends and bandmates with Michael Hutchence and Gary Beers. That is the single most Australian name I have ever heard. And Andrew's older brother Tim had an acoustic duo with Kirk Pengilly. The 5 of them plus younger brother John put together a band originally called the Ferriss Brothers. Then after briefly moving to Perth and then back to Sydney, they changed their name to The Vegetables. After meeting Gary Morris, who was a manager for a lot of Australian acts, they began opening for Midnight Oil regularly. And one of the members of Midnight Oil actually came up with the name INXS. Their first couple of albums were moderately successful in Australia, but failed to take hold elsewhere. But in 1982, they released Shabu Shuba internationally on Atlantic Records, and that got them into the Billboard album charts. That same year, they played on the Stop the Drop concert in Melbourne, along with a bunch of Australia's biggest, including Midnight Oil and Colin Hay. And in March of that year, they played their first US shows. And what followed was a string of tours opening for some of the biggest acts at the time. Adam and the Ants, Stray Cats, Daryl Hall and John Oates, The Kinks, Men at Work, The Go-Go's. Their next album, The Swing, saw their first #1 song in Australia, but it was the album after that, 1985's Listen Like Thieves, that got them their first Billboard #1, with a song that was originally not slated to appear on the album, an unfinished tune originally called Funk Song No. 13, but renamed What You Need. After the success of Listen Like Thieves, they took an 8-month break before starting their next album, and all 6 of them were determined to make every song work as a viable single. The result was Kick, and it had 4 songs reach #1. Devil Inside, Never Tear Us Apart, I Need You Tonight, New Sensation. I'm sorry, but in my brain, What You Need, I Need You Tonight, and New Sensation are the same song. They even got a Grammy nomination that year for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal. Their next album, X, also did fairly well with both Suicide Blonde and Disappear reaching the top 10. But with the end of the 80s, their popularity started to wane. And that brings us to today's album, Welcome to Wherever You Are. From what I've read, INXS used the opportunity to make a more experimental album. I saw more than one source list Welcome to Wherever You Are as their most overlooked or underrated album. And from what I'm reading, Welcome to Wherever You Are has psychedelic influences drawn mainly from Revolver by the Beatles. There are sitars, harmonicas, 60-piece orchestra, backwards tracked guitars, all things I'm looking forward to checking out. But one piece of trivia really caught my eye. Apparently, Welcome to Wherever You Are made its debut in the UK charts at number 1. And that was the first Australian album to do that since Back in Black by AC/DC. And that's the 5 things for INXS. Time to give Welcome to Wherever You Are a spin, so I'll be back soon with my first impressions.
An in England, everyone's very concerned about your trousers. I'm not surprised, actually, looking at those.
A good amount of Welcome to Wherever You Are fits in with the kind of things that I've heard from INXS. But, not all of it. That kind of Prince-inspired, funky dance rock thing was still there, and I'm hearing the psychedelic influence as well, but I'm also hearing a precursor to indie rock, and even one tune that sounds very much to me like the Velvet Underground. The first thing you hear on the first track, Questions, is a wind instrument of some kind. It could be an oboe, it could be a shinai, it could be completely electronic. It only lasts for a second before sitar and tabla start doing the song in earnest. And they stick with the tabla, tambora, and sitar sound for the whole song, though there are some brighter strings up front, some swirly synth bits, some punctuated phrases from that same wind instrument that started the song. It's got to be a shinai. Later adding bass, with the vocals over and employing heavy slapback echo. The feel is very Beatles, mostly, but honestly the instrumental section at the end feels more like the lobby of a W hotel. Heaven Sent has a strong helter-skelter style guitar riff and an aggressive beat. The vocals are a bit buried and a bit distorted, all very post-punk. But the immaculate playing and the gated reverb on the snare and the production polish still makes us feel very radio-friendly. Communication. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. Mostly it's a U2 sounding piece, but there's not much going on to recommend it. I mean, it's not bad, I guess. Mostly I come away thinking, that sure was a song. Very, very much a 90s dance groove at the heart of Taste It. Drums and bass never vary, same 2-bar groove and bass line for the entire song. Then at intervals they add some harmonica here, some reverby sax there, a 3-note piano arpeggio, a 1 minor 3/4 set of power chords on guitar. Yes, it's me. I am the one. It's okay, I guess. Not Enough Time is an 80s R&B jam. More than any other song, Not Enough Time reminds you of just how much the sound of INXS comes from Michael Hutchins' charisma. Oh my! I like the ghost note drags in the chorus too. All around is just guitars, bass, and drums, and the parts feel almost grunge-inspired. Lots of swirly chorus, both on guitars and even a bit on the vocals. Well, the song is called All Around. Might be the most straight-ahead rock thing I've ever heard from INXS. Even has a guitar solo right at the end. And next is the gigantic, colossal arrangement of Baby Don't Cry. This one has it all. Key changes, giant orchestral arrangements, layers upon layers, but all in the service of a really, really simple song. That actually reminds me a lot of Neutral Milk Hotel. I don't hate it. And next is the song I rolled last week, Beautiful Girl. And there's a very pronounced swing and feel between Baby Don't Cry and Beautiful Girl. Both are very simple rock songs, but Baby Don't Cry is the maximalist version, right? 60-piece orchestra, big vocals, lots of layers. And Beautiful Girl is the minimalist version. Velvet Underground minimalist. Really, really simple, low-energy 2-chord song with Lou Reed-styled vocals. Running from a bad home. Wishing Well. Well, you remember what I said about track 3, Communication? Yeah, same here. This too is surely a song. Go down to the wishing well. Back online. It starts off like it's going to be another, song, but the chorus does something more than just the obvious chords. And they added some slide guitar. Just a bit though, nothing to get excited about. So yeah, this is all right. Strange Desire? Well, it brings the late 80s, early 90s house music, groove is in the heart kind of feel for sure, but with more cowbell. Not something I'd ever seek out, but they do it well. And the last song is Men and Women, and it's the last thing I'd ever expected to hear from INXS. A gloomy, dirgy, minor key symphonic piece with rhythm maintained by timpani and tambourine. So the album overall, yes, is experimental for INXS. It's diverse for INXS. It takes chances, explores more ground, and incorporates an impressive array of influences. for INXS. But it's never not them. With the exception of the opening and closing tracks, I don't think anyone even slightly familiar with their hits would not recognize these songs as being INXS songs. And while I feel slightly impressed, I'm not entirely sure that I'm emotionally moved by these songs yet. That may come after a few more spins. It very well might. Anyway, those are my first impressions. Back soon with final thoughts.
I could come up with a poker song or something, and Gary comes up with very, trippy kind of concept stuff, and, John's into funk, and Andrew will come up with something that sounds like Bob Dylan, and, so it gets pretty confusing.
I'm kind of at a loss for how to wrap up my feelings about Welcome to Wherever You Are, and honestly about INXS in general. Their highest popularity came at a time when I was a teenager, my prime years for consuming popular music. And I never hated anything I heard from them. I even remember kind of liking the song Listen Like Thieves. Listen like thieves. But what I heard on the radio never moved me enough to seek them out. But hey, I grew up with music, with musicians even. No, beyond that, with don't listen to that crap, it's all style over substance flavored musicians. As a consequence, I was a bit of a snob. The way I felt about INXS wasn't unique to just them. I had very similar feelings about everyone from the Thompson Twins to Madonna. And fair's fair, there are some bands from that era that, at the time, I didn't think all that much about, but now I look back on fondly, like Wall of Voodoo, or Bow Wow Wow, or The Waitresses. But that's not the case for INXS. Up to the beginning of this week, they remain mostly inert in my overall interest in their catalog. That, and I think that these days I am more appreciative of Michael Hutchence' charisma as a frontman. Back in the 80s, I kind of saw it like, oh, you got a good-looking frontman? That must mean you're trying to distract me from the fact that your music's not very good. Like I say, I was kind of a snob back then. And look, there was definitely something in the air in the late 80s and early 90s. A lot of 60s and 70s bands were making big comebacks, and a lot of currently popular bands at the time were experimenting with adding some of those kinds of sounds to their music. And to my ears, some of them were better at it than others. Tears for Fears, for example, I think they did a tremendous job with their Seeds of Love album. Others not so much. For U2, I liked War, The Unforgettable Fire, Joshua Tree much better than the more psychedelic stuff on Achtung Baby. INXS for me is kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, I don't know that Welcome to Wherever You Are is entirely successful in its attempt to capture some of that revolver magic. But on the other hand, I do find myself engaging with these songs much more than I have any of their radio hits. So that just leaves my 5-word review of Welcome to Wherever You Are by INXS. Psychedelic, yes, but still INXS. Hey, that one rhymes! Now let's see what I'll be listening to next. First is Year. 1980. Well, alright, I was 10 years old at the time. Next we have for week and month. So, November for sure. What do we got? The third week of November 1980. Excellent. And for chart position, number 89. And on the Billboard Hot 100, we have Real People / Chip Off the Old Block by Chic. Chic. I don't know that I've ever listened to an entire album by Chic. This could be quite the education. Well, Real People and Chip Off the Old Block both appear on their album Real People. So that's what I'm listening to next. Thanks for hanging out with me, everyone. I will see you next week.